You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. For over 3 decades, R. Kelly built one of the most successful music careers in history. His artistry crossed genres, his influence reached across continents, and his music touched millions of lives. But alongside his legacy of talent, a relentless campaign was waged. A campaign determined not just to put him on trial but to destroy his name, his career, and his future. The government's prosecution of R. Kelly was not simply about alleged crimes. It became about dismantling everything he stood for. And in doing so, prosecutors used inferences, assumptions, and theories in place of the hard evidence required in a court of law. One of the clearest examples of this misconduct was the government's use of the Mann Act. This law, originally written in 1910, was designed to criminalize transporting individuals across state lines for purposes of prostitution or immoral acts. For more than a century, though, it has carried a heavy history of being stretched beyond its original meaning and misapplied in cases where the facts did not justify such charges. And in R. Kelly's trial, the same pattern emerged. The government leaned heavily on the story of Faith Rodgers, a woman who traveled several times to meet with R. Kelly in different places. They argued that her travels fell under the Mann Act. That R. Kelly transported her across state lines for the purpose of engaging in criminal conduct. And what was that supposed criminal conduct? According to prosecutors, it was his alleged failure to disclose his health status before intercourse. Let's pause and examine this closely. The government claimed that because R. Kelly did not disclose his health status before Faith Rodgers boarded the plane, then the very purpose of her travel was to commit an immoral or illegal act. In their narrative, the travel itself was criminalized not because of what happened during the travel, not because of any coercion, and not because of any clear intent demonstrated by R. Kelly, but simply because they suggested that non-disclosure transformed ordinary travel into trafficking. This is where the problem lies. Not every trip that ends in intimacy is pre-planned or designed solely for that purpose. Adults travel across state lines to meet friends, partners, business contacts, or even celebrities. If intimacy happens, it does not automatically mean the travel itself was arranged for sexual purposes. The law requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Not guesswork, not speculation, and not inference piled on top of inference. But in R. Kelly's case, prosecutors ignored this standard. They argued as if the absence of disclosure in advance was equal to intent to harm. They tried to twist silence into evidence. Yet in matters of health, especially deeply personal matters such as STD status, disclosure is not something people make casually over text messages, emails, or social media. These are private conversations, and they most often happen face-to-face in private with someone the individual trusts. To suggest that the only valid disclosure must occur before a plane ticket is used is unreasonable. It assumes bad faith without proof. It assumes intent without evidence. It assumes criminal purpose without establishing what the law actually requires, which is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And this raises an important question. If disclosure was the issue, why was this framed as a federal Mann Act violation in the first place? Because under state law, non-disclosure of an STD can be prosecuted. States have public health statutes that deal directly with this kind of allegation. If prosecutors believed that R. Kelly truly violated a health-related duty, the correct path would have been through state court under the Public Health Act, and not through federal court under the Mann Act. But instead, the government chose to escalate. They chose to take a personal health matter and repackage it as trafficking. They chose to stretch the meaning of the Mann Act until it no longer resembled its original purpose. They chose to frame a scenario where travel for mutual consent was twisted into federal trafficking charges. The motive was to stack charges, to make the case bigger, to make the punishment harsher, and to ensure that R. Kelly was painted as not only immoral but criminal on a federal scale. This is the danger of inference. When the government says he didn't disclose before she boarded the plane, so therefore he transported her for the purpose of infecting her, they are not presenting facts. They are presenting assumptions. And assumptions do not meet the standard of criminal law. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt means evidence that leaves no room for speculation. But in this case, the government's argument depended entirely on speculation. Speculation that silence equals intent. Speculation that all travel equals trafficking. Speculation that a private health matter should be interpreted as criminal conduct at the federal level. But silence is not proof. Travel is not trafficking. And private health matters, while serious, belong within the framework of Public Health Act, not federal criminal conspiracy. By misusing the Mann Act, prosecutors not only distorted the law, they also violated the principle of fairness. They blurred the line between what is immoral and what is criminal, between what belongs in state court and what is forced into federal jurisdiction. Think about what this means. If the government can call any travel trafficking simply because intimacy later occurred, then any consensual relationship can be reinterpreted as criminal for as long as one of the two parties involved took a flight prior. If the government can say silence about a private health matter equals intent to harm, then every imperfect relationship can be framed as a federal case. This is not justice. This is overreach. R. Kelly's case became a stage where the government sought to prove a larger point, that they could use any tool at their disposal, even if it meant stretching laws to fit their narrative. But the Constitution demands more. It demands fairness. It demands jurisdictional honesty. It demands that prosecutors charge crimes for what they are and not what they can be made to look like. The truth is simple. The government should have never used the Mann Act in this way. If they truly believed there was wrongdoing and non-disclosure, the proper venue was state court under the Public Health Act. Instead, they dressed up a state issue as a federal crime, misled the jury with inference, and deprived R. Kelly of the fair trial he deserved. What was the motivation? It was never just about enforcing the law. It was about ensuring the harshest possible charges, building the strongest possible headlines, and locking R. Kelly away for life. This is not what justice looks like. Justice does not rely on inference when proof is absent. Justice does not twist laws beyond recognition. Justice does not punish a man with federal trafficking charges for something that belongs in state health court. And yet that is exactly what happened here. So as we examine the government's case against R. Kelly, we must separate fact from fiction, proof from speculation, and law from narrative. Because when a man's life and liberty are on the line, the law requires certainty and not assumption. And in the case of the Mann Act charges tied to Faith Rodgers, certainty was nowhere to be found. What was found was inference. What was found was overreach. What was found was a government determined not to prove guilt but to ensure conviction. And in the end, that is the true miscarriage of justice. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.